You went to school to learn, girl, what you never knew before. I like I before E, except after C. 2 plus 2 makes 1, nah, nah, nah. I'm gonna teach you all about love, yeah. Sit yourself down and take a seat, and all you gotta do is repeat after me. A, B, C. C's 1, 2, 3. As simple as do, re, mi. A, B, C. 1, 2, 3. Baby, you and me, girl. A, B, C. C's 1, 2, 3. As simple as do, re, mi. A, B, C. 1, 2, 3. Baby, you and me, girl. Come on, let me love you just a little bit. Come on, let me love you just a little bit. I'm gonna teach you how to sing it out. Come on, let me show you what it's all about. Reading and writing arithmetic, the branches of the learning tree. But without the roots of love every day, girl, education makes complete. Teacher's gonna show you how to get an A. Spell me and you and then add the two. Listen to me, baby, that's all you gotta do. A, B, C, it's easy, it's 1, 2, 3. As simple as do, re, mi. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Baby, you and me, girl. A, B, C, it's easy, it's 1, 2, 3. As simple as do, re, mi. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Baby, you and me, girl. Shake it, baby. Shake it, baby. Oh, shake it, baby. Nah, 1, 2, 3, baby. Ooh, A, B, C, baby. Oh, do, re, mi, baby. Ooh, that's how easy love can be. A, B, C, easy's 1, 2, 3. Simple as do, re, mi. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Baby, you and me, girl. A, B, C. It's easy, it's 1, 2, 3. As simple as do, re, mi. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Baby, you and me, girl.
Thank you. Thank you, Connor, Sherilyn. That was an amazing way to kick off the event. I think we need a little bit of Connor to open up every one of our days. So thank you so much for sharing your talents with us today. One of our favorite parts of our webinars is having Connor play us in. I'd like to welcome everyone to our technology leadership panel, the new role of IT and education session. My name is Michelle Herman, and I am the Global Head of Education for Logitech. So it has now been a year since we started lockdown, and today we're talking to an amazing group of people who've created an environment to allow more than 100 million students and educators to continue to learn and continue to teach from their home, back to the classroom, back from home. It's been really an incredible and amazing year, and I'm thrilled to spend time today with some of the people that have made this happen. You know, we talk a lot about frontline workers and people such as teachers, but I really want to introduce the behind the scenes heroes who've really helped navigate the challenges faced by schools over the past year. Without these amazing people, teachers would not have been able to continue teaching and connecting with their students. So we have a very distinguished panel of IT leaders and executives representing a diverse set of schools, including public, private, and charter schools for K through 12, as well as leading higher education institutions. We hope these insights will help you in your environments as you prepare for the coming school year. And at the end, we will be answering questions, which can be entered into the Q&A section below. But let's get started. So I'd like to begin by introducing you to our panelists. So first we have Michael Berman, Chief Information Officer at California State University. Michael is the Chief Information Officer for California State University, the largest 4-year public university system in the United States, serving nearly 500,000 students and more than 50,000 employees at 23 universities in California. Next, Michael Moraza, Chief Technology Officer at New Trier High School District. Michael is responsible for teams in the area of network infrastructure, user support, enterprise applications, instructional technology integration, and construction. Michael manages 28 staff within his department. As the pandemic hit, Michael and his team recognized the need for AV resources that would allow his teachers and students to participate in person and remotely in a hybrid situation. And he implemented over 200 high school classrooms with a Logitech Rally system, which includes speakers, pod mics, and an HD camera on a tripod. Next, we have Doug Reed, Chief Technology Officer at Appleby College. Doug is the Chief Technology Officer at Appleby College, independent boarding school in Oakville, Canada, with students from over 40 different countries, where he leads a team of 12 technology professionals. In the summer of 2020, 3 months into the pandemic, Doug's team rolled out over 60 HyFlex classrooms, fully integrated setups with Logitech Tap meeting rooms and controllers, and a further 20 mobile carts using the Logitech Meetup device. Leanne Castellino, Director of Marketing and Brand Strategy at St. Michael's College School. Leanne, St. Michael's College School is a private school for boys with about 1,000 students in grades 7 through 12. St. Michael's adopted a hybrid form of instruction. Leanne brings insights into how St. Michael's leverages technology to create positive experiences for students that equip them for career readiness, in addition to attracting new students and improving retention of their student base. And not last, but last, we have Terry Galtwalt, founder and executive director of the Center for Global Education. Terry's responsible for organizational leadership and staff development. For his leadership in education and technology, Terry was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Award, as well as the ASCD Award for Innovative Teaching. The Center for Digital Government, CGE, develops and delivers virtual collaboration learning projects to youth around the world that empowers them as global citizens by connecting them to the people, places, and issues that are learning about in their classrooms. So welcome panelists. Okay, so let's jump in and get started. So I want to talk a little bit about how technology, how did it help in your last school year? So this last school year, as mentioned, has just been an incredibly transformational year. And really sped up the adoption of technologies in ways that we did not foresee. I think we knew technology was becoming a more and more important part of teaching and curriculum, but we saw an incredible, massive acceleration of technology. And we saw huge spikes in the adoption of video collaboration, supporting whether it was Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Google, BlueJeans, or any number of other cloud providers. And I'm interested in how video conferencing technology helped you get through the school year and what the challenges you faced doing that. So I want to start with Michael Berman. And I know you have a very large system. We'd like to hear about how that works for you.
Well, thanks, Michelle. You know, when our chancellor just a little over a year ago announced that we were going to go ahead and move the rest of the spring semester online, and then very quickly the fall semester as well. The short answer is there would not have been a completion of the spring semester and a fall semester without the use of technology. I don't think if we'd had a similar event 20 years ago, the outcome would have been very, very different. And I think that the preparation that we did, the fact that so many of our campuses had already moved to a model of mobile equipment, to assuring that everyone had a good camera and a microphone for their environment, at least on the faculty and staff side. That wasn't universal, but a very high percentage of our campuses were already well down that road. The fact that we already had 500,000 licenses for Zoom meant that we were able to pivot very quickly. That all the campuses, they were given 2 to 4 days depending on the campus, to move to online instruction. So we all know it didn't work for every student and every instructor, but it worked well for an incredibly high percentage of them. And we saw, for example, that in spring 2020, our completion rates for our students were higher than the previous spring. So our retention to fall was higher than the previous year. That wasn't necessarily because of the event. We were already embarked on a lot of work to make that happen, but the fact that the pandemic, despite the huge impact it had on everybody, still allowed us to complete the year is amazing, and certainly the tools from Logitech were part of that story.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I mean, I love hearing these stories. Like, it's amazing. If I flip over to Michael Moraza, how did this approach work with the public K through 12 school?
Sure. As we thought about, the theme for us going into this coming school year was certainly going to be, how do we reopen schools safely? It was that way for, higher ed. It was that way for K-12 schools. And we knew at some point in time that we were going to start bringing students back into school, and that it would be in some small format. And that gradually over time that those numbers would increase. And we're still looking at that right now. But we knew that our teachers were going to face this situation of hybrid learning. And it's something that is completely new to educators, especially K-12 educators. And so we wanted to find a solution that was going to provide the ability for the students that were remote to have the ability to see what was going on in the classroom, and not just the teacher's face in the classroom on a Zoom session, but also really the importance of the ability for communication to go on seamlessly, so that the kids that were in class weren't just sitting there with their mobile device with earbuds in, and it being a very ahuman kind of experience. We wanted it to be natural, like a classroom would normally be. And so we invested, we stepped back and we met with a third-party vendor that talked to us about all the different technologies that were in this space. And we landed on the Logitech Rally system, which, as Michelle, you identified, comes with speakers, pod microphones, and a camera. And we just threw that camera on a tripod, so a teacher, depending on what they wanted to do pedagogically, could video and capture a demonstration. They could capture just a conversation and students in the classroom. They could capture a whiteboard. The teacher could, of course, share their screen and not use the camera. But we wanted really conversations and the teacher talking and students at home. We wanted that to work seamlessly, and we needed a solution that was going to be easy, because as anyone knows, there is a whole paradigm of readiness of using a technology tool. And this was super plug and play. You plug it into your device and it just runs, and there's no feedback, there's no issues of echoing, and it really became a really solid solution, where teachers were just stopping me in the hallway as they were just starting to do hybrid, and talk about how impactful this tool was to make jumping into this new arena of hybrid learning that much easier to do as an instructor. So it was really a valuable investment.
That's so great to hear. I think, obviously, as we think about these situations, the last thing anyone wants to do is disrupt the flow of teaching, right? And to create more distractions in the classroom. And I think, we also hear a lot about how important it is to have this connection with the students on the emotional and social side. So it's so great to hear these stories. Leanne, I'd like to pop over to you. As a private school, how did video work in St. Michael's, and how are you using technology as a strategy to attract and retain students in your school?
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so, unequivocally, the video conferencing solutions provided by Logitech absolutely enabled hybrid learning and hybrid teaching to take place at St. Michael's. What's interesting is the system that this school procured was a camera that was installed in the back of the classroom, high-end audio equipment, a monitor as well, and microphones in the ceiling. And what that allowed students to do, those students learning online were able to actually participate as if they were in the classroom, even though they weren't. So the way the setup was conducted, they weren't merely observers of the class, but actual participants, which I think is really key. It really did enable the school to continue seamlessly with the curriculum, continuous learning, uninterrupted. And in terms of the academics, that's the number one thing, obviously, that parents want to know about as well. The other interesting things with the video conferencing equipment, is access. And so when the pandemic first struck, the school was in the second week of its March break. And there were actually several students who became trapped in foreign countries and have still not been able to travel out of those countries. So they have been learning remotely for all this time, and that is entirely enabled by the video conferencing solution. So at St. Michael's, 1,000 boys every day, 500 of them learning in class, the other 500 learning online, certainly enabled by the video conferencing equipment. It also has allowed teachers to really explore and sort of move the creativity to another level. So I'll give you a couple of examples. In terms of rich, meaningful learning. We had one of our students who decided during the pandemic that he'd like to start up a politics club. And he did that, and he set his sights on, a big name to join for the first session. And it was a former Canadian Prime Minister who actually joined that class, again, enabled through that video conferencing equipment. Another really great example, an Italian class who were treated to something really special, where they were able to learn and improve their Italian by watching a chef demonstrate a cooking recipe from his home in Rome, Italy. Again, one of the gifts of the video conferencing equipment. So in terms of being able to be flexible and agile and offer all these different things academically, the video technology also allowed the school to hone into other aspects of school life, namely wellness, co-curricular activities, and clubs. And while they looked a bit different, obviously, because they weren't in person, they were still allowed to continue online. And the last point on this is that, it's so important in this age group of children, and in this case, boys between 12 and 17 years old, that the familiarity of routines and schedules and all of those things continue, which again was allowed through this video conferencing solution, because everything else in the world obviously is, unpredictable and sort of hard to see where it's all going to end. But because they were allowed to, again, tap into the school and the classroom online, it really did make all the difference.
Wow, those are some incredible stories. It does feel like we're in the future a little bit now, living. I think we talk about it at work. Certainly the classroom of the future is actually the classroom of now. This is all happening today, so it's exciting. So Terry, along the same lines, I mean, you've won awards for innovative teaching. I'd love to hear about how you're applying this in remote and hybrid settings, and I think some of the creative sides as well as the accessibility, right? So bringing equality for all students.
Absolutely, thank you so much. And Michelle, when I think about all of this, I think of these extraordinary opportunities for learning that have been available for a while, but we're now at the point where our teachers have the skills, they have the technology to take what was once extraordinary and make it ordinary. Take experiences that students would wonder, I wonder if this is going to happen, but they'll walk into a class now and they're like, well, I wonder when. Moving the extraordinary to ordinary, moving the ifs to when, and basically taking these experiences and making them something that is an expectation and a possibility for all classrooms. I'll give you two examples. One of them happened earlier this week, in which we brought together over 43 countries, thousands of students who've been working together for months and months and months, online platforms, sharing and writing, blogging, all these different tools, all of which they're doing it from home, or they're doing it from school. They're doing it from the Andes in Peru. They're doing it from the deserts of Nigeria. They're doing it from the suburban Alaska to downtown Portland. And they're synthesizing these ideas together. And then they presented last week to a gentleman. His name is James Garland. He's the director of mitigation. For the UN. He's essentially the director of carbon mitigation for the planet. And so here these kids are working on their carbon strategies and then sharing it together with each other, and then to the individual who would be going and on behalf of the world to develop these plans. Another one, we were working with, I don't know if you've heard of Prince, maybe I'm dating myself, but essentially his keyboardist hosted a session with the Crown Prince of Norway on Global Dignity Day back in November. And these kids connected from all across the planet, and they had a music session where they created music together live. So we had these professional musicians, and then we would turn on the microphone in Paris, and the kids would be playing with Morris, and then they'd turn on the microphone, and these kids are all distributed in their homes at that time, right? Because it's Europe. But then they're connecting back to New York, and they're connected to Toronto. The gist is these are amazing opportunities, and they really have been going on for a long time. But what Logitech has done is it's moved something from what once cost $10,000 to a kid's home for $60. You know what I mean? Like this is, the world is different. And when we come out of this, we will have skills, technology to be doing things that are going to break down the barriers of education and help us move forward as a planet.
I can't wait for that. I'm so excited. And I gotta tell you, it makes me want to be a student again. I think the opportunities that are now available to students through technology just is incredible. I mean, you guys are all bringing experiences to these children that 10 or 15 years ago was just never even an option. So that's incredibly exciting. So Doug, I want to pop over to you on a couple of questions. I know one of the things about technology that probably it can be scary for some people. How do we make sure that this is actually easy for the teachers to use, and how do you make educators feel comfortable with video in their classroom? And can you share a little bit about some of the things that you've been studying?
Yeah. Certainly thinking back to last March, which seems like so long ago now. Like I think one of the first things that we learned, and I mean we recommend is was the ability to really prototype with a company like Logitech and their partners. And it was really that ability to test things out with faculty members, test things out with students that made a tremendous difference. And we were able to really get a feel to trying to emulate what it's like to be in a classroom remotely, what it's like to engage with someone. So from that perspective, I think that kind of approach of working with a trusted company like Logitech, really trying to emulate that learning environment really made a huge difference for us. And I think in terms of the comfort factor, we had tremendous comfort in the reliability of the solution. And we really and I think this is a huge theme for IT going forward. We really took on a really user-centric approach, a user experience focus in terms of sometimes it's hard enough to come into a regular classroom and create that learning experience, but what's it like when you come into a classroom where you have to consider those people in the room who are physically distanced, those people who are coming in from different time zones. It's a bit it could be overwhelming for a teacher. So we found the Logitech tap unit, just that kind of the control box for the room to be a really tremendous addition in terms of simplicity. Like the ability to just walk into that room, to see that your class has been pre-scheduled, and really the teacher just has to click start or start that meeting, and I think it just hopefully it kind of pushes technology to the background, and hopefully those relationships come forward. So I think certainly that in terms of simplicity has been a huge kind of a driver for us.
Great to hear. And Michael, if you don't mind, how do you do this at the scale that you're working in? I mean, you have a massive amount of partners and all this. How would you roll that kind of thing out from scale and making everyone comfortable with the incredible variation of environments?
Well, a lot of the art to it is deciding pushing as many decisions as close to the classroom as possible. So we do have hundreds of specialists all over the state of California who are working directly with faculty and facilities folks on these type of issues. But we also try very hard to figure out where we can aggregate our demand for purchasing purposes. I know in the last spring and summer, we were all facing a lot of challenges with supply chain and just getting cameras and getting headsets and so forth. And that's certainly where we have an advantage to kind of come in and say, we know they're hard to find right now, but we're not looking for 20 headsets. We're looking for 20,000. How can you help us? It does tend to get attention. So we try to do that, but we do try to the closer the IT work gets to the student and to the classroom, the less likely we are to dictate centrally how things get done, because we want to make sure that a lot of those decisions are made, directly with the faculty and the people who are going to have to work for the students.
Thank you. Thank you. Leanne, I wanted to just pop back over to you because I'm curious still on how you're using technology as a way to attract students to your school.
Absolutely. So certainly, being able to demonstrate continuous and uninterrupted learning, student engagement, and hopefully student success. These are all things that parents considering an independent school want to know about. The fact of the matter is it's, obviously an investment, and they want to know what you're doing today, but they also want to know, what do you have in place today that's going to be sustainable for the next 3, 4, 5 years? Because when you're talking to them, you're ideally looking at a length of time that their son is going to be at that school, whether it's from grade 7 to 12 or from grade 9 to 12 as a high school student. So it is very important to be able to demonstrate that not only is the success happening right now because of these enhancements in technology, but also that it can be sustained over a period of time. The other piece that's on a lot of parents' minds these days, certainly prospective parents, is what else are you doing outside of the academics? And so at St. Michael's College School, we talk about the mind, body, and spirit. So, again, in terms of clubs and activities and wellness, and those important pieces that contribute to the formation of the whole child are really important considerations for a lot of parents. In tandem with that, I think, is the ability to demonstrate nimbleness, agility, and ultimately resilience that the students hopefully can learn, which is certainly a global competency moving forward, and the ability to learn or think critically, problem solve, collaborate. These are all skills that are going to be required for the jobs of tomorrow, many of which we don't even know exist yet. So parents want to know, what are you doing in that realm? And what I would add to that is going back to those rich, meaningful, real life experiences I gave examples of earlier. That's what they want to hear about, is to say, okay, the books and everything that's part of the curriculum is great, but how are you driving that forward and making it relevant and engaging for my child now, but also into the future?
That's great. Actually, it's a great transition to something else I'm very curious about. How are you planning for the next school year? So in the fall, I mean, we don't know what the environment's going to look like. We've lived through a very interesting time. So maybe we just go back to you, Leanne, just to start. I mean, I'd be really curious on how you're looking at the future, the fall, the near future. How are you planning for that? What's changing and how you're doing that planning?
So the planning continues to be underway, and I would say that there have been a lot of lessons learned, certainly from this last year. They are looking at, what the school day looks like, so there could be some scheduling changes and, the number of courses and things like that. But I think that the technology enhancements have been so impactful and so meaningful and so instrumental in augmenting the learning that I think we're just going to continue to see that grow. And I say this as a creature and a champion of innovation and technology. So I get really excited when I talk about this stuff because, I think part of this discussion really is about the audience, who are the students. We're talking about, Generation Z for the most part. So, children 25 years and under. And these are people who have grown up with tech. They don't know life without it. The fact is they have always lived in a globalized world. So they understand a lot of these concepts that maybe for people in another generation, it's still new. So understanding technology and being nimble and agile with it, I don't think is a really hard sell for a lot of these students in this age group. And also a lot of them have millennial parents. So parents 40 years of age and under who also have maybe a deeper appreciation and understanding of the power of technology and what it can do in terms of the learning.
Great. Michael Moraza, kind of same question. How are you planning for the fall of next year? What's different about your planning?
Sure. It similar to probably many organizations, change in any size organization is a challenge, and I think workers were forced to, as Leanne said, to be nimble and to sometimes accept new things without a long process, and because they knew that these changes were needed to support students. And so some of those changes that would typically take multiple years to get through committees and pilots, we just had to embrace and take on. And so as we start looking at, as I think you said at the beginning, right, the classroom of the future is here today. We're incorporating those into our construction plans that we have for new classrooms, so that these types of systems now become a part of our standard of what's in a classroom, just because we anticipate that distance learning is going to be something that's going to become an option for many of our kids. Or days, we're up in the north, like some of my colleagues here that are in Canada, when the weather gets really bad, schools would traditionally close and we would have what we call snow days. And now those are probably going to be a thing of the past, where our educators and our kids are just going to be able to leverage these kinds of tools so that the learning can continue. But we're also looking at alternatives of students who might not be able to access our curriculum by being able to come in. How can they still access our classrooms with these tools moving forward as a part of our overall strategic plan?
Wow, amazing, amazing. I'm sure the kids will be disappointed not to have snow days, but it's really amazing to have this continuity regardless of the situation, right?
Yeah.
Going forward. Michael Berman, kind of same question, and or if you want to comment on anybody else's comment.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. I just wanted to follow up on Leanne's point about the changing of students and the new generations and how they relate to technology. Great point, and there certainly are huge differences, but we're also finding that there's a lot of difference depending on the student's background. So we have so many students who come from very impoverished backgrounds, who are the first in their families to go to college. And so on the one hand, we have students who come in with owning 10 devices and having used technology, having had a cell phone since they were 6 years old or whatever. And then we have other students who might be sharing one cell phone among 8 people in a family. And so we've got that entire spectrum. So one of the challenges we're also facing is just the range of preparation that students come in terms of their access to technology and their level of technology. And it's really challenging. And the events of the last year have just brought that to a fore. I mean, it was there bubbling below the surface, but when so many services and so much education was predicated on face-to-face contact, I think that was hidden a little bit. And once we went to using digital as the primary mode of connection, that ability to connect, to have bandwidth in your home, to have the right kind of device, just really put things in stark contrast based on where our different students were and what a broad range there was. So it's a huge challenge. And looking ahead to the fall, we're looking very seriously at taking a much more proactive approach to making sure that every student has the tools they need to succeed.
Yeah, very fascinating. Doug, it sounds like you're nodding your head. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. It sounds like you've had some similar experiences, and I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, I think just in terms of preparing to come back to campus, like I think it does make you think that that what we've taken for granted, in terms of the physical experience. So I think planning to come back to campus will maybe there'll be more emphasis on what does it mean to be physically together again, even if it's distance in a classroom. All the great things that Leanne and Terry have talked about, those kind of great experiences. The hope is that those things happen and more in a physical classroom. So I think like going forward there'll be perhaps more of a premium placed on in terms of like the intentionality behind like what it's like to be in a physical space, because we've taken it for granted. And I think coming back together with the technology as well, like I think there'll be more emphasis on like making these experiences like so much better than they were before.
Yeah, wonderful. Terry, having kind of a world view at some level, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. Both for just how we're adjusting and planning for the future, and anything else you want to add.
Sure. I think there's a couple of points. First off is that this is, this technology revolution has been amazing, and it has caused those significant jumps. But I think there's two factors we need to keep in mind. One, right now, teachers are drinking from the fire hose. You know what? They're just barely staying alive. And they're doing everything they can to provide access and education to as many students as they possibly can. And so they're not necessarily ready to take these Ferraris out on the highway. They're just trying to get things going. But as we roll into next year, I think we're going to have a whole crew of teachers who are equipped with skills and equipped with technology, as well as students, to do something exceptional. And I really appreciate what Michael said earlier about that. In the midst of this, we need to remember, I was on a panel in India just a couple of months ago, and we are going to see an increased digital divide. And unless we acknowledge that divide, and unless we are proactive to address it, we risk losing more students. So I think that we need to think about hard questions in our public post-secondary, our public secondary, and independent schools as well. Who is not in our classes, right? Who does not have their screen on, right? Because who knows what's going on in their home? And how are we equipping our teachers to deal with this reality that they're zooming into some very challenging situations? And are teachers equipped to do that? But we have a lot of serious questions we need to address around educator mental health, around student mental health, and ultimately around that digital divide, which is not gone because we have this technology, but might actually be amplified.
Yeah, those are all really incredible concerns. I think those are some giant questions. I'd love to spend another hour just talking about those, but they're very serious. I think along the same lines, what has this change happened in education that will never go back to maybe the way it was pre-pandemic? Do you have thoughts on that, Terry, about what will we never go back to?
You know what? We'll never go back to a classroom that is restricted by a textbook and a YouTube video. And I'll tell you a quick story about something that we saw from students. And these were students in looking in regular grade 10 social studies globalization, which is part of the Alberta curriculum. And they had studied all the theory, and then they were connecting to these kids in Costa Rica. And the kids in Costa Rica were sharing about this mining challenging that they were facing, and how the mercury from the gold mines was seeping in. And the Canadian students were all moved, and they were saying how important it is that they go down there and they help fix Costa Rica. And the Costa Ricans responded, well, it's actually a Canadian mining company that's doing it. And then the next week they were talking to some indigenous youth in Peru who were facing horrible persecution by militias, by these mining companies. The Canadians wanted to go down there and fix them. And the Peruvians said, yes, well, it's a Canadian mining company. And I remember again, this kid who turns, and they said, rather than fix us, why don't you change the legislation in your country so that this doesn't actually happen? And I remember the kid turning to their teacher, and you can't teach this, and said, but this isn't my Canada. These are experiences that when you have those face-to-face connections, they change kids' lives. And I think that's the excitement on the horizon that we have going into this next year.
Yeah, actually, it's incredibly inspiring. I mean, I'm just so curious on where this all leads us to as a society, right? I mean, this is maybe some of the breakthroughs that needed to happen for true globalization. So, Michael, Messina, kind of same question. What do you think we're never going to go back to?
I think that piece that Terry, you talked a little bit about, that I think we are that there has been a loss that I'm not sure we're going to recover, is that piece of educator and student mental health. There are aspects of what was just natural in schools, in learning, and in classrooms that just feels very different now. There's just, we've been in person with students coming into class since November, and just gradually that transition, it's taken some people time to just get adjusted to that. And we have some adults and some kids who are just not comfortable with coming into contact with people. And so I think, unfortunately, that's a loss. That how do you how do you get that back? How do you get that relationship piece back? That, as a former teacher, I don't know, Terry, if you still teach, but that aspect of that relationship with kids and adults and those real meaningful learning experiences that Terry just described, it's difficult when you do it through Zoom, right? It's difficult to be there to sit with a kid and to help them through whatever academic or personal thing that they're going through. And there are just amazing things that can happen in a classroom when you have a full set of kids there. And it's just not the same when you have some kids that are on Zoom that aren't there. And so I think that's one of the lost things that I think, unfortunately, we may not get back. And we may lose some good educators who made us decide, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I need to take care of my own personal health, or they're just not in a place where they can feel like they can go out in public and be around people anymore, which it's a sad loss for the whole education community.
Yeah, it's interesting. Leanne, kind of on the same ideas. I mean, do you have thoughts on how we offset some of those losses, right? So there's probably things we're doing maybe that we're happy to never do again, but certainly the impact on the faculty, the teachers, and some of the face-to-face contact is being missed. It's difficult, right? So how are you guys handling some of that and what that looks like going forward?
Well, I guess I have a more hopeful view. I think the fact that we're having this discussion on this panel really does speak to the fact that the pandemic has irrevocably, impacted education. And so I think that can only be a good thing moving forward. What strikes me is, we're looking now as teachers increasingly are not the sole holders of education. They are more and more co-collaborators and co-designers of it, which I think is really key, because the fact is you can pick up a device or find a device and get the answer to your question literally in nanoseconds. You don't need to go to a school, necessarily be in a classroom to learn. So the idea that learning is not just confined to the classroom, I think is an exciting development for sure. I also think that because so many people have been sort of forced to adopt things that maybe they thought they never could before because of the pandemic and the technology piece, there might be more people who are more willing to embrace change and try new things and sort of be more of the mindset that technology can be your friend. And I think that's an important message moving forward, because what it also speaks to is the constant redesigning, rethinking, and refining of the whole process of learning and teaching, which I think continuous learning and continuous improvement like that can only be a benefit to everyone.
That's great. And actually, that's a great way for us to talk about what are we looking forward to in 2021. And I encourage anyone attending, if you want to add one word that describes how you see the future of 2021, please put it into the chat. We'd love to see it. And I'd like to talk to our panelists about that. So Michael Berman, what are you most looking forward to in 2021?
Well, first, Leanne, those are great points. And I'm really looking forward to a more informed conversation about how we meet student needs with technology. I think that so many of our faculty and our staff have because they've been forced to change the way they work this year, they've had to learn so much in order to do that. And I'm not saying that everybody now becomes a proponent of using technology for everything. And some people are going to say, okay, I lived through that and I never want to do anything like it again. I want to be back sitting with 8 people in a room and our books open. And that's fine, because there's absolutely value in that. But I also have talked personally to many instructors who said, I never really got the online thing. I never really wanted to do it. And wow, now that I've been through it, I never want to go back to the classroom. I think this is better. And I've heard that from a number of faculty. So it's on both sides, but the critical mass, we've talked for years about when we're going to hit the tipping point and when we're going to hit the critical mass where it's commonplace for faculty to understand how to do technology enhanced or technology enabled teaching. We're there now, and I think we can have much more informed conversations and much less of, that's just not for me, I don't want to talk about it. So I'm looking forward to that.
Interesting. Doug, what about you? What are you looking forward to in 2021?
Yeah, just to build on what Michael was saying, I think like I'm looking forward to like really what's next. I think we've kind of, it may seem strange, but I think we've almost raised the bar in terms of expectations. Like I think people have seen a little bit behind the curtain of what education is and you know what it's like for to be in a classroom. And I think like the expectations will probably get higher in terms of, you know, if we're going to be together physically, then hopefully our interactions are more meaningful. Like Terry said, you know, hopefully we can bring in these tremendous like global experiences where we're actually working on real problems rather than theory. So I think the more we kind of really kind of tweak the use of this technology that really, you know, over a year ago seemed to be the domain of like the boardroom, you know, that this was really just for people in boardrooms and this is how they communicated. I think we've kind of opened that up, and I think going forward, I think there'll be hopefully much more kind of choice in terms of pathways and experiences, and hopefully the education providers like kind of respond to that in terms of like, you know, there's a definite need here and a passion for people to really craft their own kind of learning experience. And I think if we respond to that, I think there'll be a tremendous uptake.
Yep, very inspiring. Again, I love it. Terry, how about you? Same question.
I'm gonna say giddy up. You know, like I think that our teachers and God love them have done a Herculean task to transition in the way that they have, the mental health that they need, that they are struggling with, that our students are struggling with. We need to recognize that. But the gist is that this year has been about survival, I think, for many. Next year is going to be, okay, you know what? I now have this Ferrari sitting in my driveway. I've kind of cruised around the block. I know there's a highway out there. The Grand Canyon's just down the street. I want to go. You know, and I think that if we as education leaders and say, okay, we know this, now we got to train our teachers, right? Just because the Ferraris in the driveway doesn't mean that we know really how to use it on the highway. We need to train them, and then we need to empower them to make things happen, because it doesn't happen by accident. I'll tell you, I haven't been involved in technology for a long time. I've seen a lot of technology make their way back to the closet. What we need to do is empower and train and then provide those opportunities. And they are there. There are amazing providers out there, but they're not, we need to make sure that we reach out and make sure that teachers are ready for it.
Great. I'm going to ask Michael Moraza in a second, but I just want to remind people, if you want to add any questions, we'd love to spend some time at the end to answer any Q&A. But Michael, same question, just
yeah, thank you,
really
Michelle.
exciting stuff here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the thing that I'm most excited to is that teachers have really embraced new tools and new resources because they were forced to because of the pandemic. And some of them we talked about today, but there are a whole set of resources and tools to engage our students in real world experiences and real world questions that we talked about, that Terry gave some excellent examples of. And when you have a room of brilliant educators that will collaborate and share information about how they're engaging students with these new tools, I think, again, we're just on the forefront of an exciting time with educational technology and how it's going to be used to raise the bar of our kids' knowledge and experiences.
Great. And then Leanne, what do you think?
Sure. Building on what Michael just said, I mean, I guess I'm looking forward to expanding digital connectivity and to some, you know, an earlier point, to the digital divide being decreased. I mean, I think those are things that absolutely have to be prioritized for sure. I'm also really looking forward to the use of AI in creating personalized, customized experiences for the student. And I think that's really powerful. So in a classroom, you know, everyone's got their own device, let's say. How can they communicate in that classroom from where they're sitting in a seamless way that's customized and personalized, and add that to the discourse of the classroom, I think is incredibly exciting. Open source technologies as well, in terms of, you know, just like the sky's the limit, right? So, you know, what do we have to look forward to in that space? So as somebody who kind of just, again, loves this stuff, I look forward to what's next. And again, really driving creativity and driving new ways of learning and new ways of teaching are really, I think, at the core of all that, enabled by technology.
Great, wonderful. So I'm going to go into some of the questions. We're getting some great questions. Michael, Moraza, I'm going to start with you as a public school system, but how does a school fund technology, and how do you plan for that? Is it in your budget? Do you go through grants? How do you plan for the future around supporting this technology purchase? Oh, and Michael, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. So we knew that during this point in time, we were going to need to use money outside of the budget. And so we had some conversations, of course, at the leadership level that we needed to plan for some contingency and set some funding aside to just take care of that. But to me, it's really about long-term strategic planning. So it's outlining, whether it's on my scale or it's Michael Berman's scale. It's really about laying out a map, a roadmap of what you envision, engaging the proper stakeholders from all the way down to the classroom level and the students and the parents, all the way up to the senior leadership level, so that they understand the direction you're going and what the resources that are going to be needed to accomplish that, so that everyone's on the same page. It's putting together a plan and just effective communication skills that are critical.
Great. And I just to kind of flip over, Michael Berman, do you have any more thoughts on the funding model as well?
Well, it's challenging because I think on the one hand, it's brought into stark relief how critical technology is, and certainly there's been a huge expenditure on technology, and some of that's been driven by federal stimulus money in our environment. But these aren't one-time costs. You can't just simply buy a lot of technology and then you're done. And while I think our leaders know that in theory, it's very hard to adjust to that when they've kind of been a model of projects and investments, as if getting new technology was like building a new building. Right now we've got some money, let's buy some technology, and then we don't have to worry about that for 10 years. And we know that's not the case. These are ongoing costs, and they're greater than before. And it's going to take it's going to be a long-term process. But I think the good news is I do think that a lot of our leaders, and in my case as a public institution, including at the state level, they get this, but they're still challenged because there are so many needs for everything from healthcare to roads to K-12 schools versus higher education schools. I only say versus because there's only so much funding, and it's really tough. So it's gonna take many years to shake out. It's not gonna happen quickly.
Yep, got it. And maybe just one last question. We're kind of getting to our time, but there's so many interesting things to talk about. So Doug, I just wanted to ask you one other question around, I know you're experiencing and training the teachers. I think this is obviously one of probably the biggest concerns. So we make this investment in technology, but how do we make sure what are the training programs? How do you get teachers comfortable? How do you roll that out?
Yeah, I think I saw the kind of comment in the chat as well from Calvin. I think one of the key things I think is hopefully try and simplify, and it sounds so easy to do, but if you can kind of simplify the technology that's in the classroom and make that as intuitive and as straightforward for the teacher to use, like hopefully your training needs actually go down, so that if you've taken those steps beforehand to maybe understand the issue, try and account for things like great audio, which is so important in a remote setting. If you can account for that and kind of almost like pre-design those in, I think that hopefully diminishes the need for training. Obviously, there's still a tremendous need to support teachers and help them along the way. But I also think there's a little bit of somehow getting out of their way as well. I think they've learned a tremendous amount, and it's almost, I think there's an element of showcasing that now and letting those teachers kind of lead the way as well.
Great. Michael, I'd love to hear from you too on that one, and then pop over to Terry, and then.
Yeah, I think there is certainly power when it's not your trainers that are providing the training, but when you have some of your own teaching staff that can provide that training. And we've really tried to leverage that through the use of video. So We all have seen the power of what YouTube can do to teach yourself a new skill, whether it's a cooking skill or fixing something in your home, just to be resourceful. And the same thing happens in the area of educational technology. When we were rolling out our Logitech camera system, I had a team work with some teachers. We put together 4 little short 2-minute clips of how to use the system that became super efficient for our teaching staff to ramp up and be comfortable with using it. So I think the power of video in that form is really good. But I'll turn things over to Terry.
Well, I remember going at this 10 years ago where we would wheel in these massive video conferencing systems and you had to talk about portals and ports and firewalls. Friends, we used to run, we wouldn't even connect without a test. And now we're at the point where, like with Logitech technology, we'll send it out on a shipment. They'll open it, they'll connect it to their computer, and the next thing they know, these teachers are connected to the world. Like, I am so incredibly excited about the potential to really do something different, to democratize access and to open those opportunities to all students, because it's not just in North America that this is happening, but this is happening all across the planet.
Fantastic. I don't know how we could have ended on a better note. So I just really want to thank the panelists today. This has been such a pleasure to spend time with you and hearing about how you're working through this incredibly difficult time, but you make it sound easy, and it sounds like the results are just amazing, and it's incredibly an optimistic future. I can't wait to hear more about. So I really do appreciate all the time that we got to spend today. I wish we had another hour to talk, but I want to thank you, Michael Berman from California State University, Michael Moraza from New Trier High School District, Doug Reed from Appleby College, Leanne Castellino from St. Michael's College School, and Terry Gottwald from the Center for Education, Global Education. So thank you all. I really appreciate it. And we get to hear Connor play one more time for us. So I just thank you, everybody.
I was scared of dentists and the dark. I was scared of pretty girls and starting conversations. Oh, my friends are turning green. She's a magician's assistant in their dreams. Yeah, ooh, yeah, ooh. Running down through the riptide, drifting away to the dark side. I wanna be your left hand man. I love you when you're singing that song, yeah. I got a lump in my throat, 'cause you're gonna sing the words wrong. There's this movie that I think you'd like. The man decides to quit his job and move to New York City. Cowboy's running from himself. She's been sitting on the highest shelf. Yeah, ooh, yeah, ooh. And they come unstuck, lady, running down through the riptide, drifting away to the dark side. I wanna be your left hand man. I love you when you're singing that song, and I got a lump in my throat, 'cause you're gonna sing the words wrong. I just wanna know if you're gonna stay. I just gotta know. I can't have it any other way. I swear she's destined for the screen. She's the closest thing to Michelle Pfeiffer that you've ever seen. Lady, running down through the riptide, drifting away to the dark side. I wanna be your left hand man. I love you when you're singing that song, and I got a lump in my throat, 'cause you're gonna sing the word drunk. Oh lady, running down the riptide, drifting away to the dark side. I wanna be your left-hand man. I love you when you're singing that song, yeah. I got a lump in my throat, cause you're gonna sing the word drunk. I got a lump in my throat, cause you're gonna sing the word drunk. I got a lump in my throat, cause you're gonna sing the word drunk.